populations within the ATU. And our research study consists of 3 key phases. However, today we are focusing on one aspect of one key phase regarding students' conceptualisation of mental health across an Irish multi-campus university. However, before we begin, I'm just going to go through a little bit of an introduction or background into the topic of mental health within Ireland. So according to the OECD 2019, 1 in 4 people experiences mental health issues. And in particular, Ireland has one of the highest rates of mental ill health across Europe, with 18.5% of the population recorded as having a mental health condition, of which 75%, so 3/4 of all mental health disorders that persist into adulthood emerge before 24 years of age. And notably, most full-time undergraduate students fit into this category, which therefore students can be seen as a high-risk group towards mental health disorders. And lastly, the number one health issue expressed by young people is their mental health. In order to progress or improve support services for students' mental health, or even potential solutions for students' mental health, first we must find out what mental health actually means to them, regarding what are their perceptions and what are their opinions of mental health. And then it is only then we can begin to provide supports and services tailored to their specific needs and their specific wants and their specific concerns of mental health. So overall, the absence of a broader conceptual operationalisation of positive mental health leads to a deficiency of effective mental health promotion strategies. So therefore, the aim of this study was to gather a profound understanding of students' perceptions of mental health through developing validated mental health tools for a situation analysis amongst the student population. So as previously mentioned, there are 3 key phases to this research. So this is just a slide on the overview of the overall project. So the first phase, which is the one we're focusing on now, is exploring students' definitions of mental health and mental ill health. And the second phase is exploring staff perceptions of mental health support services across the campuses. And lastly, developing appropriate data collection tools in order to conduct a mental health situation analysis across the 3rd level sector among students. So all these key phases are based on the recently published framework for student mental health and suicide prevention framework for Ireland, which focuses on 9 key themes, which helped build the reasoning and the motivation behind this project. But again, what we're discussing today is the very first phase of exploring students' definitions of mental health. So just to give you a bit of a demographic background, as you can see, that is a map of Ireland showing how small it is, but you can see the 8 campuses distributed across the west of Ireland. And according to the sample size calculator, which is a 99% confidence interval with a 5% margin of error, the ideal sample size across this campus was 646 students completing the survey. However, we recorded 723 responses, but many was incompleted or couldn't be used for other reasons. So the number of valid responses was 655, so still exceeding the ideal sample size of the 646 students, thankfully. And lastly, regarding ethical approval was granted by the Atlantic Technological University Ethics Committee on the Sligo campus on the 9th of February earlier this year. So in regards to methodology, how we actually gathered the data from the students, we looked for the student voice through focus groups, in which was semi-structured in nature. And secondly, we developed a questionnaire utilising a Qualtrics package, which was distributed online to the students. And how we actually recruited the students was through various means. So only registered Atlantic Technological University students and St Andrews College Sligo students could actually complete the survey, which was 655 students, through means of social media, post, probably plaguing and annoying students online, also through making links with students' unions, so they'll be sending out emails, as well as academic and professional staff, whether it was through emails online or when they were in class, they allowed time for students to actually complete the survey in their class, which was very nice of them. So regarding how we analyse the data, firstly we inputted all the valid responses, so 655 responses, into the Navivo 12 software, in which essentially is a data management system, which is needed, I suppose, for quite a large sample. And from there we could code the data. So we utilised a reflexive thematic analysis approach by Brown and Clark 2006, which is a 6-step process of coding qualitative data. And lastly, we conducted inter-rater reliability testing, which is essentially given a subsample of the data to an independent party, just to see if the coding that has already been done is in line with an independent party. So this is the results overview, which I suppose provides a wee snippet into the quantitative side of things of the questionnaire and of the respondents. So as you can see, the first graph regarding the students' category of registration, you can see over 60% of students that completed the survey were undergrad students, meaning they were completing their ordinary degree or bachelor's degree, where they were under the age of 23. As you can see, the second highest that accounted for the respondents was an undergrad mature student, with over 20% of the overall respondents, meaning if a student was 23 or over completing an undergrad course, they were essentially a mature student. And also you can see over about 12% accounted for the postgraduate, whether it's postgraduate TAW courses or postgraduate research courses. And lastly, you can see just a small percentage, which 16 students do an other, which covers courses that are in line with apprenticeships and springboard courses. And secondly, you can see what the second graph shows that over 30% of students who completed the questionnaire either previously or currently were diagnosed with a mental health disorder, which I suppose makes the findings that bit much more interesting. If they were portraying their previous or their non-experience with mental health, so it allowed for those comparisons in the finding section. So as you can see, this mind map provides an overview of the findings, in which findings portrayed an array of themes and sub-themes, in which depended on and varied on students' characteristics and attributes. And as you can see with the legend, you can see the top 3 themes, which was emotions and feelings, internal thoughts and views, and struggle, of which was expressed by students in the questionnaires. So as you can see, there's categories under each theme. So your well-being, functionality, signs and symptoms, presence of disorders, internal dialogue, perceptions and views, and thoughts. And then after that, there's subcategories or sub-themes. So regarding well-being, students express, the level of well-being, the welfare of mental state, emotional stability and contentment. And regarding functionality, that further detailed down into, I suppose, the daily coping with mental health. But in the next few slides, I'll go into greater detail of each theme. So our first main theme was emotions and feelings, which was, I suppose, nearly the highest recording theme of students that didn't experience any mental health disorders previously or currently. As you can see, a respondent expressed mental health that it is much harder to perceive and to explain to others because it just is, and sometimes there is no explanation as it is just a feeling. And I suppose supporting this, another respondent expressed that mental health is a person's level of well-being, affecting the level of how much you can manage and cope with certain things, and determines the way you perceive and look at things. So what kept coming up was, I suppose, students seeing mental health as well-being. So as you can see, students view the word mental health and well-being hand in hand with one another, so seeing them both, I suppose, as the exact same as each other, which represents their, I suppose, their emotional stability, their contentment, and their mental welfare. So I suppose, what level of well-being are they at? How much can they control within their life and within their feelings? So if they can control their feelings, they can control a lot more in their life. And lastly, how can they cope with certain situations? Do they get down in the dumps, depending on the external factors, or can they, I suppose, get back up and carry on through and, I suppose, move on with life, depending on the external factors that are hitting them? So students also refer to mental health as their internal dialogue, so relating to their internal thoughts and views. As one respondent summed up quite well, the voice in their head. So essentially what they seen was, if you had positive self-talk, that equated to positive mental health. But if somebody had excessive overthinking in their head, that equated to negative mental health. And so students referred to mental health to their, I suppose, their internal dialogue within their mind and their overall outlook on life. As another respondent said, a balanced outlook on life, realization that only certain things are within your control and not everything can be influenced by you. So that's, I suppose, relating to another, I suppose, quote that a student expressed that isn't on this, that in which said, a healthy mind is one that negative thoughts do not affect. So essentially saying the negative thoughts do enter, though they have that control, and they don't let those negative thoughts affect them personally. So therefore, students see having the ability to control that voice in their head and their outlook in life can provide as a backbone to students' meaning and understanding of mental health. And our last theme is down to, or called, struggle, where students who are currently or previously diagnosed with mental health disorders, which was 25.65%, who were previously or currently diagnosed at the time, seen struggle as a much larger piece representing their meaning to mental health in comparison to those who had no diagnosis of mental health disorders. As it was probably summed up quite well by this respondent, they see mental health as an illness in which everyone in their life will suffer with, whether it is stress, anxiety, or more. And also, I suppose, their backbone to that definition of their meaning is, having the signs or the symptoms or the presence of mental health disorders. So it is, I suppose, quite interesting that those who had experience with mental health disorders seen the more negative aspect and seeing mental health as a negative thing, whereas those students who had no experience of mental health disorders, they seen, I suppose, more the positive side, seeing mental health as, mental well-being, and saying that, you can have control of their internal thoughts and internal views and their feelings. So it just, I suppose, concludes that people's experience with mental health does play quite a key role in their understanding and, I suppose, their perception of mental health. So to conclude, I suppose 3 key points from the findings: that though the fundamental dimensions conveyed by the views of the ATU students population, it must be noted that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, and that perceptions do vary depending on students' previous or current experiences, And it also provides evidence that the student voice plays a critical role when developing student solutions for mental health, as it does depend on their views and their perceptions of mental health as a whole. And lastly, regarding recommendations for either future research or for future students' mental health, in order to support or maintain students' mental health, you must first understand what they understand first, and then it is only then mental health support services can be tailored to individuals' / population's needs, depending on the student's opinions and perspective, in which is reiterating the no one-size-fits-all approach. So, thank you.